Go ahead, Pulkit.
We are live.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. And very happy to welcome you all to this very special event. It's my pleasure and privilege to welcome you all to this event where we are inaugurating not just one, but two special programs today, an MSc in Behavioral Finance and an integrated MSc and PhD in Behavioral Finance. So my name is Pulkit Khanna, and I serve as an associate professor and associate dean at the Jindal Institute of Behavioral Sciences. Today with me on this call, we have a special guest, Mr. M. Damodaran. Thank you for joining us well ahead in time, sir. We also have our founding Vice Chancellor, Professor Rajkumar, Dr. Sanjeev P. Sahni, our Dean Admissions, Upasana Mahanta, my colleagues from the Jindal School of Banking and Finance, Dean Ashish Bhardwaj, Vice Dean Professor Ram B. Ramachandran, and my colleagues from Jindal Institute of Behavioral Sciences, Vipin Vijay Nair, the teams that worked very closely together to put together these programs and curate them. So we also welcome everybody who's with us on YouTube and watching this live stream. We are very happy that you've tuned in to see this special moment for all of us today. So it has always been said that breakthrough innovation occurs when we bring down boundaries and encourage disciplines to interact with each other. These two new programs that we are set to inaugurate today, which are designed and offered collaboratively by the Jindal Institute of Behavioral Sciences and the Jindal School of Banking and Finance, bear testimony to the spirit of interdisciplinarity that we hold very, very dear at JGU. These new offerings also bear testimony that it's so important to recognize how human emotions, how human cognitions actually have a huge impact on financial decision-making, and how much lies beyond the realm of rationality and classic economic theory. So without much ado, I think we will begin the proceedings for the day. And may I call upon Professor C. Rajkumar, our founding Vice Chancellor, to deliver the welcome address.
We can't hear you, Professor Rajkumar.
We're unable to hear you.
Professor Raj, we can't hear you.
I think he can't hear us.
Finance and the launch of the MSc and PhD integrated program in behavioral finance. Pulkit, can you hear me?
Now, yes, you're audible now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said that, okay, let me repeat it. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. So I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to this very special inauguration of the MSc in Behavioral Finance and the integrated program in MSc and PhD in Behavioral Finance. The Jindal Institute of Behavioral Sciences and the Jindal School of Banking and Finance have put together this fascinating interdisciplinary program. All of us know that the role of behavioral aspects have become very significant in the field of economics and finance. And it is only appropriate that an interdisciplinary university such as OP Jindal Global University takes the lead in launching these programs. I am grateful to Dr. Sanjeev Sahni, the Principal Director of JIBS, and Professor Ashish Bhardwaj, the Dean of the Jindal School of Banking and Finance, for launching this program. I also want to thank Mr. Damodaran, who is himself a very distinguished banker and somebody who has worked in the field of banking and finance, who has kindly consented to deliver the inaugural address. With those words, I'm going to once again extend a warm welcome to all of you and wish you the very best.
Thank you, Professor Rajkumar, for those kind words and for setting the tone for today's event. So up next, I'd like to call on Professor Sanjeev P. Sahni, who is the Principal Director of Jindal Institute of Behavioral Sciences, one of the two partners behind these two new programs, and also the advisor to the Vice Chancellor. May I call on you, Dr. Sahni, to deliver the inaugural remarks, please?
Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon to everyone. Who could be a better person than Mr. Damodaran to inaugurate or launch this particular school? I just want to give you a little historical background that Jindal Institute of Behavior Sciences is just 8-year-old in OP Jindal Global University, which is kind of a research think tank. And we are totally involved in the research, behavioral sciences research, as well as we have a PhD program where 9 people have been awarded in the last 6 years. So the first time, 4 years back, we introduced a subject in behavioral economics. And probably this was the hit program that every law school student and few other students really wanted to do this. And then we realized that, yes, there is a need of this subject. Then we recruited 2 people for PhD, one from China and another from India, where they did a lot of work where they measure that how the investments are in relation to risk and moods when people are going to invest in India. How what are the timings? So like in US we have a Monday blues. In the same way we try to do, and we got a very good results, and we have published quite a lot. But the foundation of behavioral finance is definitely an area based on interdisciplinary approach, including scholars from the social sciences and business schools. Earlier, with due respect to Ashish and Mr. Damodaran, that the finance people were not accepting behavioral scientists, but I'm glad now they felt the need that, yes, whether we are dealing with the customers or clients or the partners, anyone, that maybe the psychologist may be of some help. From social sciences perspective, this includes the field of psychology, sociology, anthropology, economics, and so on. On the business administration side, this covers areas such as management, marketing, finance, technology, and accounting. But the one very important thing is whenever we start a new program, how students select these programs. What will be the placements? Where are going to be the internships? How much money I'm going to get it after completion of this? But I want to put it on record that we have consulted quite a lot banks, mostly private banks, where they have tell us that especially these days, the consumers in India experienced a high online fraud encounter, which is rating 69% in 2020, according to the Microsoft 21 Global Tech Support Scam Research Report. So, what we are thinking that because of the financial crime, which is a significant ongoing challenge for banks and institutions and individuals. So regulators and financial authorities introduce new strategies frequently to detect and prevent financial crime. And it is important we need to study the behavioral aspect of those kind of things. The last thing which I would like to say, it is also important for young researchers and scholars to understand more sophisticated methodology and developing technology to evade legal scrutiny and commit offenses, like including fraud, money laundering, financing terrorism, understanding various financial decisions. And I want to put it on record that we already have a brain behavior laboratory where we have a polygraph, lie detectors, brain mapping, and other things, which practical things will also be introduced to the students. So I'm really excited about this school, and we are totally geared, and we are looking forward to have more and more students. At the end, I would like to acknowledge, and I would like to say thank you very much, a big thank you to our Vice Chancellor, Professor Rajkumar, who has allowed us, even being an institute, to be a partner with the Jindal School of Banking and Finance and to run this particular program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Dr. Sani, and thank you for talking to all of us about JIBS and the excitement we feel about launching these 2 new programs today. Now we move closer to the highlight of today's event, which is the keynote address by Mr. Damodaran. Thank you, sir, once again for joining us today. And before we went live, we were talking to you about the punctuality and the on-time approach of Indigo Airlines. You epitomized that. You were perhaps the first one in today's call and with us at 3:45 p.m. So we are very, very happy again to have you with us. While Mr. Damodaran does not really need an introduction, I would still please take 2 minutes to just introduce him to everybody tuned into this event. JGU has also had the privilege to welcome Mr. Damodaran in the past as well. He is an Indian corporate advisor, mentor, and a former senior government official. As an IAS officer of the 1971 batch, Mr. Damodaran has been the youngest chief secretary in India. Sir currently serves as the chairman on the board of Indigo. He has previously also served as the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Board of India, that is SEBI, the chairman of Industrial Development Bank of India, IDBI, and the chairman of UTI, where he restored the institution to financial health, making it one of the most remarkable turnaround stories in Indian financial sector history. Sir, I do understand that this very brief introduction does not quite do justice to your rich and illustrious career, but I'm sure everybody is waiting to hear your keynote address titled Behavioral Finance in the Indian Context. So over to you, sir.
Thank you for those very kind words. I owe a debt to the founding Vice Chancellor, Professor Rajkumar, for thinking of me when it was decided to launch these two programs. I have a large number of friends all over India and perhaps the rest of the world also, who recognize that my formal education has remained incomplete and therefore give me every opportunity to have a ringside seat on academic programs where I question my sense of belonging even while the program is going on. Having said that, let me also say that I have been, even if I have not had too much of an interaction, not to the extent required, with the group that you represent, I have been an admirer. I have not waited for the university and the various schools to get awards before I applaud from the sidelines, because I applaud the effort even before recognition comes in from the outside world. And I can see the excitement and the enthusiasm which, under his leadership, informs all activities on the campus and outside the campus. I think one of the path-breaking approaches, if I might call it that, which all of you have accomplished and continue to practice, is the recognition that there is far more requirement for interdisciplinary programs than have existed until now. And I think even in the space of 8 years, you have managed to put together far more of those programs which move people away from being unidimensional human beings to persons having an opportunity to paint on a large canvas where multiple disciplines constitute the colors with which they paint. And I think that enriches not just them, but the society that they live in, the academic environments of which they are a part, and of course the world to which they belong. Today is one more step in that direction when you're announcing two programs, and to Dr. Sani's comment that Professor Bharadwaj and I, the likes of us, had kept behavioral sciences outside the mainstream. In a sense, I can plead not guilty, because for years I have thought that you needed to see far more things. In fact, if I may go back a few years, when the National Law University in Bangalore announced a program called Law and Poverty, I know that there were very senior members of the legal profession who said, what kind of program is this? Law and poverty. Law and economics we understand, but why should we talk in terms of law and poverty, law and women's empowerment? These can at best be the subject matter of one or two lectures, cannot be a whole course. That was their, let's say, their complaint. I was one of the votaries of this, because I believe that in a country like India, law and poverty needed to be studied by the same set of people to see how each one influences and informs the other, because given the poverty levels, given the various divides, not just the economic divides that exist in India, I thought that this was a path-breaking course, and that was several years ago. But you have traveled much, much further. I was privileged to be a part of a launch sometime last year, where again you had brought together two disciplines which you thought that students needed to address, needed to absorb, and needed to go out and see how the interplay of those disciplines impacts the manner in which they live and work. And today you are making even further progress when you are recognizing ground reality. In a sense, what bringing behavioral science into the area of banking and finance is the recognition of a ground reality which many people have refused to recognize, or if they did not give enough importance to over the years. If we can wind back to several years ago, decades ago, perhaps centuries, we were told, none of us were around, but we read it from the books. We were told that there was an oversimplified world of the rational man, perfect competition, perfect markets. We realized soon enough as we looked outside that this existed only in the fertile imagination of some persons and also in textbooks. And outside of textbooks, you could not find these things that you could be looking. And many, many years ago, when I attempted to be a student of economics, and I say attempted because it's such a vast science that if anyone claims that he has studied economics, then I think he or she opens himself or herself to a barrage of questions on what might have been left out in that pursuit of study. So I'm very careful. I say that I attempted to study a part of it. At that time, some of you might find this laughable. The earth-shaking question, which was in chapter 1 of the textbooks on economics, was whether economics is an art or a science. And we discovered soon enough that that question was irrelevant. It didn't matter whether it was an art or a science or a combination of both. It had its value system, provided you absorb the principles, provided you put it to good use in your life and your work. And that is all that there was. Mercifully, we have moved on since then. There were people that wanted to look at the purity of economics, leave it uncontaminated, and this is a word that I've heard from some professors years ago, by other disciplines coming in. And then mathematics came. Mathematics came in and almost pushed economics to the margins, and it took center stage. So formulaic expressions took over non-quantitative explanations. And that was the way that the science of economics, the art of economics, called what you will, developed over a time. Because those inroads were made, and then you saw that there are some people that didn't like mathematics. There are some that still don't like, which is why the book Mathematics Without Tears even now sells a large number of copies. So they abandoned economics because the fear of mathematics kept them out of economics. But those were all several years ago. Today we live in another world. We've seen the demise of the mythical rational man already. The rational man died, and perhaps the last nail in his coffin was behavioral economics. I think he was already in the coffin, but before it was closed, was behavioral economics that was really the last nail in the coffin. But even those that were, let's say, believers in behavioral finance did not abandon rational. You look at Herbert Simon, who got the Nobel Prize in 1975. His was a halfway house. He said, we make decisions that are rational, but within the limits of time and information available. So this was called bounded rationality. It was rational. At the same time, you couldn't wait indefinitely till kingdom come to get all the information that you needed. You couldn't really have the time and the information that you needed. And therefore, he propounded the concept of bounded rationality. It was 75 when he got the Nobel Prize. We've moved on since then. There have been, in this area itself, 4 others that have got it. We had the psychology of judgment and decision making, which propounded, which propelled Professor Kahneman to talk in terms of a cognitive bias, prospect theory, loss aversion, things of that kind. Robert Schiller came later with rational exuberance. And then, of course, Thaler, the latest in the list, with his nudge theory and his explanation of what we're seeing around us. But I want to go back to something else. I want to look at the world of securities markets in India to see what is it that we are likely to learn from the way people behave in the market. The markets comprise a large number of investors. They come in all shapes and sizes. Indian, foreign, big, small, retail, institutional, you name it. There are several people that occupy each of these boxes. Some, in fact, cut across boxes. Foreign institutional boxes, for example. On what basis do they take the decisions in the securities? We believe that these are rational decisions or nearly rational decisions when we are, I must confess, barking up the wrong tree. Many years ago, the poet John Milton said, of growth, instinct, and reason, all defined in man. Man was the only rational animal. But to think that all human decisions are powered by reason and not by instinct would be to live in a world which doesn't exist, has never existed. So there are several people that look around whose basis for taking decisions is what the neighbor has done, what the lady next door has done in the few hours after she saw off her husband to office and before he came back for lunch, while she was in the terminal buying and selling shares, to even suspect that she was acting on the basis of research, or even understanding things like risk diversification, that you needed to look at different sectors, different stocks, would be to blame her unfairly for what she was not doing. Somebody said that you could make money in this. That was the proximate trigger for decision making, and it had nothing to do with reasons. Much later, today, if you pick up a newspaper, the last maybe a month or so, you will read of one gentleman who is a legend in the world of investing in Indian markets. Some people call him the Warren Buffett of India, but the principles are completely different. It's true that his presence is big in the Indian market. And I know a number of people that are investing in stocks. Why? Because he invested in those stocks, forgetting that those stocks have run up. And this might not be the best time to enter those counters. forgetting that the stories actually happen after he's paid his money in the market. That's the essence of the story. Did it run up 200% in 2 months or in 3 months or whatever? And then retail investors, in a willing suspension of disbelief, they don't want disbelief, and therefore they think if he can do it, why can't I? But he's done that. He's already come in at the right time, gone out at the right time. Now, is this something that you can explain in terms of behavior? Yes. This is the Pied Piper phenomenon, where there is somebody leading in the front and everybody is following him, thinking that that is the way to glory, that is the way to prosperity. And we see a lot of that happening in the Indian market. If you look at those that claim to study ratios, they look at all manner of ratios, not just the P ratio. But the one thing that they forget is a word called trend. There's another word called history. So if you look at what is available now and in the last 1 year, you then become a victim of a recency bias. You are then looking at what is the here or now or the immediate past and not looking at where this company came earlier, and you might be making decisions which are suboptimal because you haven't had the time or the inclination to look at something much further. Greed, for example, is a very major trigger for making investment decisions. Ego. If you want to make acquisitions, there are some people that go in with their ego. Ego drives the acquisition cost, and Indian corporate history is not lacking in examples of persons that have paid top dollar for investments that, as Wordsworth would have said, when lying on a couch in vacant or in pensive mood, they might regret those decisions. But at that time, the ego was driving, reason took a backseat, and therefore those decisions were made. It continues even now. I don't want to give you the latest example of why ego might have driven an investment decision, but we leave you to look at that. There's another interesting behavioral aspect which initially surprised me, no longer does. And this is this business of pricing your products. We were led to believe that if the price was lower, other things remaining the same, the demand would be higher. But then people started saying that a lower price might give the impression that the quality is good. If you don't price your product sufficiently high, the buyer might think this is cheap stuff, cheap in terms of quality too, and therefore might give it a wide berth. That also somewhere strikes at the foundation of some of our initial beliefs with which we set out on this journey of discovery. Why you pay more? Because you believe that that is better. That is something that also influences. I want to mention 2 or 3 other matters. And I'm going to quote to you without taking names what 2 finance ministers said. One finance minister, many, many years ago, was asked on the floor of Parliament, why is it that the Sensex is going up when your economy is moving south? There is no positive story in your economy. There is nothing to enthuse anyone, and yet the Sensex seems to be going up. He gave arguably the best explanation to my mind. He was a very distinguished economist. He still is with us. He said, markets have their own logic. I will not attempt to understand. That is the way he explained the disconnect between the direction in which the economy was moving and the direction in which the Sensex. There was another gentleman who came after him, a very articulate finance minister, who every time the market Sensex went up, would make statements saying that our fundamentals are strong and that is why the Sensex is going up. And the next day, the Sensex moved to the same extent in the opposite direction. His explanation would be in terms of some externalities. So you wonder what happened to the strong fundamentals that were existent 24 hours ago, but which both got rocked by some externalities to bring it down almost as quickly as it went up. So the more I look at these statements, the conduct in the marketplace, risk aversion versus risk seeking, depending on where you are at what point of time, clearly that is something. Herd mentality, if you look at the way fund managers behave very closely, there is somebody who is a star fund manager. You get to hear that he has picked some stocks, he's done better than the rest, and therefore you end up picking those. It's not the result of research. It's not the result of your own figuring out what is right or wrong, but pure herd mentality. If this guy knows and his records seem to show that he knows, let's follow him. Why take thinking decisions? Let's respond. I'll talk to you again about one very interesting aspect, and this is something that I had the privilege to see. Not too many people would have seen this. When the budget speech was being made, initially budget speech in India was at 5 p.m. because the timing was meant for the British. 5 p.m. in India was 11:30 in Britain. It was a good time. So we had our budget speeches on 28th February at 5 p.m. Then it was moved up to 11 o'clock. Finally, we said one more symbol of British imperialism we must shed. So we must have our own time for budget, and we moved it up to 11 o'clock in the morning. Now, when the budget speech, part A of the budget speech, which is the non-quantitative bits, has the broad explanations on why part B will contain the bad news, all of that comes in part A. When that was going on, in the third or fourth paragraph, the then minister made a statement, we are going to give very, very major importance to irrigation. Now, I was looking at two screens at the same time. One was the budget speech, and the other was the market, because the market was not suspended. And the minute this sentence was uttered in Parliament to say we are going to give importance to irrigation, immediately the share prices of two persons who were making steel pipes went up almost vertically. You could see the near vertical climb because some people had bet on that one statement. What happened when it came to part B and the excise duties, all the enthusiasm vanished. Because while irrigation was going to get importance, the materials with which those pipes were made were hit by a higher excise duty. So if you study those two things, you find the vertical climb and the vertical fall all in the matter of a few hours as you move from part A to part B of the budget speech. We are impatient. Sometimes we don't have the patience to take decisions. And the last thought that I wanted to share is a quote from a former Prime Minister of India, one who served us only for 4 months. But I had the privilege of watching him fairly closely. A down-to-earth common man who understood India as well, if not better than most other people. And he once said in a meeting where somebody said, we're waiting for more information to take a decision, he said, and he said this in Hindi, he said, Antim Satya ki khoj mein jeevan barbaad mat kar. If you have enough information, act on it. So your biases, your prejudices, all of those will help you not to wait for Antim Satya. To take decisions on the here and now, because there is a time value also. If you postpone it in search of perfection, you'll never take a good decision. I thought I will use this opportunity to share some thoughts with you on a matter that has fascinated. Why do people act the way they do? The other related area, and I'm sure Dr. Sani will help me with this at some time, which I want to understand is how much is the extent, I don't know whether it's measurable, between thought and between word and deed. Because this is something which has always puzzled. If those two gaps can be covered, I think we are in a good place. We don't have to wait to go to heaven. The only two gaps we have to bridge are the gaps between thought and word and deed. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being with you. It's been a privilege. And, when Professor Pulkit was doing the introductions, she said this was a brief introduction. Let me give you an even briefer introduction while I sign off. Dr. Jamshed Irani was supposed to introduce me somewhere, and someone who had a lot of spare time, I suspect, gave him a 2-page thing on what I did and did not do over a fairly long life. And since I knew Dr. Irani very well before the thing, he told me, I'm not going to read all of this. Can you tell me what I should say? I said, fold that paper, put it in your pocket, and introduce me with one sentence that perfectly describes me. Career civil servant who strayed into the area of finance, got lost, and is still trying to find his way out. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Damodaran, for that thought-provoking address, and you've left everybody with a smile on their face. It was really wonderful to listen to you as you spoke about market forces, investment behavior, all set against the backdrop of human egos and eccentricities. And your address was so apt considering the programs that we are set to launch today. So before moving on behalf of all of us at JGU, I'd like to thank you again very much for taking time out to join us today. May I now request IT to step in to unveil the program brochures, please? Thank you. So moving on to talk a little more about the programs and to introduce them to all of us, I'd like to now invite my colleague, Professor Ashish Bhardwaj, who is currently the Dean of the Jindal School of Banking and Finance. Over to you, Ashish.
Thanks very much, Pulkit. Thank you so much, Mr. Damodaran, for that wonderful address. It just puts everything in the right perspective. We were lucky to have you speak around the same time last year when we launched a very bold undergraduate program, the first in India, at the intersection of finance and entrepreneurship. And this time we are equally lucky to have you on this conversation around behavioral finance, which we think plays a very important role everywhere, particularly in India. So thank you very much for setting the stage. I must tell everyone that the idea of doing these specialized programs around behavioral finance, it was proposed almost 8 or 9 months ago. And since then, a lot of people have worked tremendously hard, both administratively and academically, to put together what I still think, and I might be wrong, is the first full degree master's program in behavioral finance in India. And that's offered by institutions that specialize on one hand in finance, and very importantly, on the other hand, behavioral science. Till now, in my understanding, in India, behavioral finance as a study topic, as a theme, was largely restricted to either an odd elective course in a public or a private university, or at best a day long or 2 days long training program leading up to a certification. So we've really upped the ante. We are very hopeful that this will appeal to a lot of young researchers, a lot of young students, a lot of practitioners in the industry. I'm quite thrilled to be part of this event. That's really around what Mr. Damodaran has explained, the fundamentals of behavior in finance. So it's essentially about studying the crazy ways our very flawed human brain relies on to make decisions on a daily basis, and some of them tend to have ramifications. But what I'm really looking forward to, what I'm really happy about, are two things really. And after that, I'll tell you why we launched and what are the programs about. One is that our school is partnering with a constituent, very focused research institute, the Jindal Institute of Behavioral Sciences, to jointly curate and deliver this program. This, I think, is our single biggest strength, to be able to merge disciplines and ideas and make it into a study offering or a degree offering. The second reason I'm quite excited today is that with the launch of these two programs in particular, the Jindal School of Banking and Finance, which is a school focused on technology-led finance and commerce, has now become a full-scale school for learning, for academic scholarship and practitioner excellence at all levels of higher education. So that includes undergraduate, postgraduate, and now PhD level studies and research as well. So now to everyone who's listening to this on YouTube, live or as a recording later on, this could be people who are completing their undergraduate degrees by next year, those who are at the early stages of doing academic research in social sciences, practitioners who are looking to spend some time in academia to research on a topic of their choice. You should know that being a part of a full scale program around behavioral finance is really make you going to stand out both in academia and in the industry, finance industry in particular. And I'm going to tell you why. And I'll build a lot on what Mr. Damodaran has already said, Dr. Sahani has already said in the last few minutes. So yesterday, a Nobel Prize was announced in economics. Although that has more to do with wages and labor markets, you should know that at least 5 Nobel Prizes in economics have been awarded for really solid work that links human cognition with market behavior, with decision making at an individual and at a firm level. It's really a great example of how interdisciplinarity works out in academic research. Mr. Damodaran has already articulated very beautifully, but let me summarize for you in one sentence what economists, psychologists, behavioral scientists who've been working together have found over the past several decades. And that one line summary is that human beings are not rational decision makers when it comes to finance. This is true across nationalities, cultures, occupational groups, religions, gender, and it's beginning to be understood in the world of finance and financial services around the world. I've been a student of economics myself for many years now, and I'm absolutely convinced that rationality is and has been for a long time now a really useful lie, which makes the world slightly more comprehensible and easy to explain. That's it. Its role just ends there. In fact, Dr. Sahani and I have had a lot of conversations about how right or wrong economists generally are. And Dr. Sahani, I'm afraid to say that you were right. You were right most of the times. So all of us here, and we have some seasoned experts here in from the world of finance. Mr. Damodaran is here, my own colleagues. Most of us believe that we make pretty rational financial choices, but nothing could be farther from the truth. But all of us, and I repeat, all of us on a daily basis succumb to cognitive biases that distort our choices. A lot of those choices are around money, which has an important role to play in our lives. And it's a software problem, really. The brain is to be blamed. In fact, our colleagues in JIBS tell us that we should blame how slowly the human brain is evolving relative to all these massive changes around modern lifestyles, changes in the finance industry, how technologies are changing that are around us constantly. And if we can't make our brains go fast enough, then let's enjoy the current pace and understand how it affects our skills around financial management at the very least. And that's why we created these advanced programs to fully understand as much as we possibly can as one school and one institute around behavioral finance. Traditional finance theory, a lot of my colleagues from the field of finance are here. Traditional theory of finance assumes that individuals have complete self-control. Wrong. Individuals or investors understand all available data and information prior to making any decision. Wrong. Individuals or finance specialists are always consistent in their decision making. Wrong again, which is why we see a lot of problems that seep into politics and our social lives. We tend to strongly prefer sometimes, an aversion to loss more than realization of gains. That's against classical economics and traditional finances. We all know it. We tend to rely too much on past experiences of gain and loss than the actual probability of something occurring. That's something completely irrational. And Mr. Damodaran talked about the Pied Piper phenomena in the stock markets, where I might say herd mentality has led to all sorts of outcomes, sometimes really disastrous. So our software is really outdated to deal with these problems of modern world, including issues and matters around finance, investment choices, money matters. So these programs are, simply put, are these essential software updates that all these enthusiasts of finance, I think, need to get in order to make sense of this dynamic field in a better way. Now, once again, speaking to those who are considering studying behavioral economics, behavioral finance at a master's or doctoral level, in these programs, you'll be able to we'll make you investigate how information can be used to make decisions of daily lives and how it might be misused, and that may have an effect on your investment choices. In the master's program, the 2-year master's in behavioral finance and the slightly longer doctoral program in this area, we will help you ask questions and we'll help you think a bit more critically about biases that other speakers have talked about, heuristics that continue to shape human behavior, which is so difficult because of the uncertainty that we face in making any choice, and the fact that we are subjected to different kinds of risk appetite all the time. We've put together a very, very fascinating coursework, which on the one hand is quite rigorous in its approach to finance, quantitative finance, qualitative finance, and on the other hand, a fair amount of emphasis on behavioral sciences, understanding the psychology of decision making for an individual consumer, individual investor, or an individual entity, a firm. I want to keep track of the time, but since we've unveiled the brochures, and we are going to be uploading both the documents on the websites, the website of the Jindal Institute of Behavioral Sciences, the website of Jindal School of Banking and Finance. So I encourage all of you who are interested in this field, who want to study in one of the two programs, please download the brochure. It has some fascinating information on why the field is relevant, what are the job prospects, and most importantly, what is it that the coursework entails? What kind of research can you expect? How in depth can you go in each of these areas of finance, of behavioral science, of psychology, of economics, and so on? So I'll stop there. I don't want to spoil all the fun that you will derive when you look at the brochure. But let me very quickly thank the Jindal Institute of Behavioral Sciences for this partnership, particularly Dr. Sahani, Dr. Pulkit Khanna, Vipin Nair. All of them have worked really hard in putting this together with us. Thank you very much for your efforts. Before I hand it over to the next speaker, my colleague Upasna Mahanta, professor in the law school and dean of admissions of JGU, I would like to very quickly invite my colleague Professor Ram Ramachandran to briefly talk to you about the potential of these programs in academia and in the industry. Ram is a professor of practice. He's also vice dean strategy and planning of the school, and very importantly, he heads the school's graduate office, the VITAL office, which stands for Virtual Teaching and Advanced Learning Office, where these programs are going to be housed. So let me stop there. Thank you very much for your time, and over to you, Ram.
Thank you, Ashish, and it was absolutely an exhilarating talk by Mr. Damodaran. It kind of not only touched on the various aspects of behavioral finance, but also provided a level of contextual aspects of human behavior in the mix. The behavioral finance as a field itself is fascinating for the industry. I've been working in the Wall Street firm for more than 25 years, and it is how it has progressed over the last 15, 20 years, especially after the 2008 crisis, in terms of the herd mentality that essentially drove the economic downturn with the mortgage-backed security issues. The people at the top echelons of these Wall Street firms have started recognizing the irrationality of human behavior and how it is driving decisions, both on the market side as well as from the personal side, in terms of loss aversion, in terms of the herd mentality that was mentioned, as well as in terms of the biases that builds into the models, right? And so in the last, I would say, 10 years or so, institutions, both commercial institutions, large investment banks, as well as conglomerates, financial conglomerates, insurance companies, and asset management companies, and investment banks themselves, they have started encouraging hiring for folks who have got not only the discipline from a theoretical underpinning, but also understands how data can be manipulated, how they understand how market conditions can or cannot make people behave in a certain fashion. So there is from what they call as quants in the departments of JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs and the Bank of Americas of the world. They have been hiring people with the skills in the area of behavioral finance in hordes, and people who understands not only the empirical analysis of how to deal with data, but also understands the psychological aspects of human behavior. So there has been a tremendous amount of scope and growth, and this is an exciting career opportunity for students in the industry to pursue, both as financial analysts, as research quant modelers, as well as as you go up the career, people have been engaged in consulting opportunities in various capacities, and so as financial analysts, as financial modelers, as accounting specialists, as a quantitative mechanics of finance, there has been a tremendous amount of growth in terms of these industry areas. But on the other hand, there is also a very specialized need for people who understand behavioral finance in the academic world as well. Students are learning about the different theories that come in as part of the behavioral finance, and being able to explore new research areas as well. Speakers before me spoke about the Nobel Prizes in Richard Taylor's and Robert Schiller's of the world, and the emphasis on these fundamental research is only growing. And so our ability to bridge those two gaps in terms of psychology and human behavior, along with the fundamentals of finance, is only will grow even further. So there is potential for many of you who are either as a doctoral student or as a graduate level student to really reap the benefit. This is the what I call as the new area of specialization, especially in India, where there is growth for digital inclusion and financial inclusion and make in India process. It is all requiring some level of finance and finance discipline to be brought in. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Ashish. Back to you, or Upasna.
Upasna, over to you.
Thank you, and thank you. So both as a faculty at Jindal Global University and as the Dean of Admissions and Outreach, I think it's a truly exciting moment to see the launch of the MSc in Behavioral Finance and the integrated MSc and PhD in Behavioral Finance jointly by Jindal Institute of Behavioral and Jindal School of Banking and Finance. It's a moment of great significance. And the distinguished speakers for this evening, they've already highlighted the significance of behavioral finance as an area of study, the opportunities and avenues that it opens up. I feel that the launch of these programs at Jindal University offers students a sort of unique opportunity to access interdisciplinary and innovative education. We emphasize on rigorous research, practice-based learning, offer the possibility of engaging with leading academics, scholars, and researchers to trade ideas, explorations, and experiences. And I'm positive in my belief that this program will produce an outstanding set of learners who are committed to rigorous scholarship. And we are truly, truly grateful to our distinguished speaker for this launch, Mr. M. Damodaran. Thank you so much for giving us your valuable time, gracing this occasion with your presence, and sharing your thoughtful insights and experiences with us. We are thankful to our Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. C. Rajkumar. Your inspiring and empathetic leadership motivate us to strive for the best. Our deepest gratitude to Professor Dr. Sanjeev Pisani, Principal Director, Jindal Institute of Behavioral Sciences, and Professor Dr. Ashish Bharadwaj, Dean, Jindal School of Banking and Finance. Thank you for being the driving forces behind making these programs a reality. Thank you to the teams of faculty and staff, both at JIBS and JSBF, who have worked relentlessly to put these excellent programs together. A special thank you to Professor Pulkit Khanna for so brilliantly anchoring today's program. A big gratitude to our teams, Admissions and Outreach Office, IT and Communication teams. They have been working behind the scenes to enable a smooth launch of the program. And last but not the least, I want to take a moment to offer my deepest gratitude to all of you who have joined us virtually to mark this important moment. We are grateful for your presence. We are grateful for your support. We look forward to your continued engagement, encouragement, and support towards our new programs. As Professor Bharadwaj has already said, all the information regarding the programs will be available both on the JIBS and the JSBF website. You could contact anybody from our Dean of Admissions and the admissions team for more information about the programs. And we look forward to engaging with you continuously and talk more about these new programs, MSc in Behavioral Finance and Integrated MSc and PhD in Behavioral Finance. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Upasna, for those concluding remarks. And with that, we come to an end of today's inaugural event. I would like to once again thank everybody, all of our speakers for this evening and all our guests who tuned in to the live stream on YouTube. Thank you very much. We may end this meeting now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.